China could be in the middle of the worst COVID wave the world has ever seen, with millions of deaths. Not that we will ever know the truth. As the communist country finally abandons restrictions beneath a veil of secrecy, a spate of celebrity deaths could be the only clue we will ever have to the scale of their exit wave. President Xi Jinping has used his zero-COVID strategy to strengthen his iron grip on the country and become the first Chinese leader to get a third term in power. Finally, in the face of mass demonstrations against his zero-COVID policies late last year, Xi pulled an abrupt about-face, scrapping the rules almost overnight and unleashing a massive wave of infections. But could it now be his undoing? And what effects might it have on the world economy? And why might it be bad news for Taiwan? We set out to answer those questions. China was the first country to introduce a strict and brutally enforced COVID lockdown when it placed the city of Wuhan, ground zero for COVID, and then the wider Hubei province under strict measures in late January 2020. The Beijing-friendly World Health Organization praised Xi for his decisive action, and lockdowns became the default means of dealing with the virus until vaccines came along. Western nations rushed to vaccinate their populations, using the immunity they provided to remove lockdowns while keeping their death tolls as low as possible.
You can see the candle of hope, and we must do all that we can to nurture its flame.
But China did not. Instead, it took a leisurely approach to vaccinating its population while keeping the strict measures such as COVID testing, contact tracing, and travel curbs in place. Entire cities were locked down over even a handful of cases, with people shut in their homes until the case rate dropped back to zero, hence the name Zero COVID. Xi kept this up, even in the face of the highly infectious Omicron variant, subjecting the economic powerhouse of Shanghai to more than 5 months of draconian measures in order to stamp out an outbreak last year. That is despite the measures being deeply unpopular with residents, who resorted to shouting off their balconies in protest. Which begs the question, why did he do it? Perhaps the best explanation lies in the mind of the man in charge. President Xi is an authoritarian Marxist who believes that the state should decide what is best for its people. He has spent his 10 years in charge of China cracking down on personal freedoms while enhancing government power, which experts believe will only accelerate during his third term. What Xi wants is total control over China, and Zero COVID handed it to him on a platter. Suddenly, the government had a legitimate reason to track all of its people. It could peer into the minute details of their lives, and if it didn't like what it saw, it had sweeping powers to detain them in their homes for as long as it liked. In short, Zero COVID was an authoritarian's dream. There is also another, more practical explanation. Chinese vaccines are less effective than Western jabs when it comes to protecting some of the most vulnerable. That gave Xi a powerful practical as well as an ideological reason to hold on to Zero COVID. On November 24th, at least 10 people died when an apartment block caught fire in Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang province, which had been under strict lockdown for 4 months. People blamed COVID restrictions for trapping people inside the building and for preventing the emergency services from getting there in time, and protests quickly swept the country. Faced with the most serious threat to Communist Party rule since Tiananmen Square in 1989, Xi dropped Zero COVID with virtually no public acknowledgement that he was doing so. This meant that people had little or no time to prepare for the new reality, such as topping up their vaccines, and China's 1.4 billion population was poorly protected when the virus was let loose. That, coupled with the fact that many in China have had no exposure to the virus before due to Zero COVID measures, means the wave of infections has been particularly devastating. Though the government is reporting only a handful of cases each day, the country effectively stopped counting just before Christmas and has stopped holding daily briefings on the data. Leaked doctors' notes suggest that 250 million people may have fallen sick in the first 20 days of December alone, meaning just shy of 13 million people per day. Meanwhile, data modeling for The Economist suggests China's death toll could hit 1.5 million by the time this wave is over, putting it ahead of the US as the country with the highest number of COVID fatalities. Beijing has reported just a few dozen of those deaths after changing the criteria for what constitutes a COVID fatality to exclude most cases. But evidence from the ground, photos and videos of hearses queuing outside morgues, tells a very different story. A spate of recent deaths among middle-aged and elderly celebrities has also sparked speculation on Chinese social media that they are COVID-related. Gong Zhitang, a famous actor, Chu Lanlan, a well-known opera singer, and Wang Jinggong, an award-winning director, all passed away in recent weeks without a specific cause of death. Chu was just 40 years old, and things could be about to get worse with the emergence of the XBB.1.5 variant, which is now spreading globally. Medics from the Centers for Disease Control believe the new variant, nicknamed the Kraken, is even more infectious than Omicron because it is spreading faster in the areas where it has taken hold. China also runs the risk of another new variant emerging because of the sheer number of people currently infected with COVID in the country, which is why several other countries have introduced mandatory testing regimes on flights. With millions of people falling sick with COVID every day in China, workplaces are increasingly being left empty as people stay at home to recover. And, as the saying goes, when China sneezes, the world catches a cold. Economists predict a chaotic start to the year for the Chinese economy, with years of steady growth going into reverse as the wave of virus passes through. With most major economies already facing a recession in 2023, that is likely to make problems worse, at least in the short term. Factory shutdowns due to COVID outbreaks will also mean that global supply chain issues, which have plagued markets since the pandemic began, are likely to continue. With the war against COVID well and truly lost, some fear that General Xi Jinping may look to start a real-life conflict in order to shift attention away from his failure. Before the policy was suddenly dropped, Zero COVID was held up as part of Xi's legacy. Solid evidence that China's authoritarian model was superior to the freedom-obsessed West. With that legacy now in tatters, some fear that Xi will turn his full attention to another legacy project, the invasion of Taiwan. Taiwan has been fearful of attack ever since Xi vowed to reunify the mainland with Taiwan back in 2019, reserving the right to use force if necessary. In reality, reunification is a myth, as the Chinese Communist Party has never ruled in Taiwan, but Xi isn't one to let facts stand in his way. While many observers and analysts view the prospect of an attack on Taiwan as remote, the US is increasingly fearful that Xi may resort to such a move. If he does, then Joe Biden has repeatedly said that American forces would be sent to defend the island, teeing up a direct conflict between the two biggest global superpowers. While that dire scenario is far from certain, it seems fair to assume that the longer China's COVID wave goes on and the harder it hits, the more likely it is that Xi will resort to desperate measures as a way to divert attention from his failures. While some predict rapid Chinese economic growth in the second half of the year, once the COVID lockdowns and this wave of infections are done, global headwinds could prevent or blunt that. Backed into a corner, the Chinese dragon could choose to lash out instead. As the Chinese New Year dawns, Western leaders have several very good reasons to wish the country a healthy 2023. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Search Daily Mail videos on Facebook for more clips like this.